I'm going to read a chapter from Utterly Me, Clarice Bean by Lauren Childs. Chapter 1. This is me, Clarice Bean. I am not an only child, but I sometimes wish I was. My family is 6 people, which is sometimes too many. Not always, just sometimes. My dad is mostly in an office on the phone, going, "I can't talk now, I'm up to my ears in it." Mom is always gribbling about pants on the floor and shoes on the sofa. She says, "This house doesn't clean itself, you know. Who do you think does everything around here? Mr. Nobody? I don't get paid to pick up your smelly socks. If I did, I'd be a rich woman," etc., etc., non-stop. I'm the 3rd oldest, and I think it would have been a good idea if I was the youngest too. I'm not quite sure why my mom and dad wanted to have more children after me. They don't need another one, and it's a shame because he is spoiling it for everyone else. He's called Minnow Cricket, and he tends to be utterly a nuisance. He is non-stop whining and causing other people to get themselves in trouble. You might think it would be a relief to come to school, but if you do, then obviously you don't know some of the people in my class. Naming no names, for example, Grace Garpello, what a show-off. Sometimes I stare boredly into space, thinking utterly of nothing. This makes Mr. Wilburton very irritated. I get on her nerves. I know this because she's always telling me I do. To be honest, Mrs. Wilburton is not my favorite. I am from Earth, and she's my teacher. Mrs. Wilburton says I have got utterly not a speck of concentration. I am trying to prove her wrong about this by trying to remember to concentrate. I think about it all the time. I'm so desperately trying not to not concentrate, and I say to myself, "Don't drift off like you did yesterday." And then I start thinking about how I drifted off yesterday and how I was thinking I must listen to Mrs. Wilburton and all these things she is telling me. And then I'm wondering, how does all this stuff she's telling me fit into my head? And then I'm wondering if I should have a clear out of the stuff I don't need anymore. You know, like when my dad cleared out the attic, except we all decided we needed everything and he just had to put it all back again. But maybe valuable space is being taken up in my head and with not the important things, and that is why I can't concentrate, because all my concentration space has been used up on things like elbows off the table and don't pinch your brother and pointless, not needed things that don't matter. Clarice Bean, will you please come back down to earth this instant? It's Mrs. Wilburton. You can tell by her honking goose voice. She says, "Clarice Bean, you are utterly lacking in the concentration department. A common housefly has got more ability to apply itself." And I want to say, "You are utterly lacking in the manners department, Mrs. Wilburton, and a rhinoceros has got more politeness than you." But I don't say it because Mrs. Wilburton is allowed to say rude things about me, and I am not allowed to say them back. Those are the rules of school. Then Mrs. Wilburton says, "Class, I am announcing the very exciting subject of this year's Parents' Night competition." Mrs. Wilburton doesn't look one bit excited, but I think it would make an elephant running into the classroom, waving its arms around to get Mrs. Wilburton hopping. Anyway, everybody must pair up and think of an exhibit that they would like to put together and have on show for when all the parents traipse in to see just what their little darlings have been up to. Of course, me and Betty Moody are a pair because we are utterly best friends. Mrs. Wilburton says the project must be based on a book we have read and learned something from. It sounds utterly dreary to me. When I get home, I go straight upstairs to Mom's closet. I take a mini cheese with me because they are my favorite things at the moment, and you never know when you might want something to nibble. Mom's closet is a good place to be on your own by yourself, and it's where I like to read my book. You need a flashlight, and it's lucky that I got one for Christmas. I had to ask for it and put a note up the chimney for Santa Claus. I don't think I believe in Santa Claus, but Mom and Dad want me to, so I write to him anyway. I wrote, "Dear Santa Claus, if you are true, please can I have a flashlight, and if you are not true, then please can someone else get me one?" I think it is important to keep your options open, because you never know what is the actual, in fact, truth these days. Granny says the world is a very mysterious place, what with men in space and so on. She says, after all, who would have thought you would one day be able to send someone a picture down the telephone or cook a leg of lamb in 5 minutes? I didn't used to be so much of a reader. It just happened when Granny gave me a book called There Was a Girl Named Ruby. Mom says there and then I turned into a bookworm. There Was a Girl Named Ruby is from a whole series of books called the Ruby Redford Collection. Betty Moody and me utterly love them. They are about this amazing girl. She's a bit like a detective, but she's only 11. She doesn't have any brothers and sisters and gets to go on these sort of adventures. The most I do is go to the corner store on my own. Ruby Redford lives in this crazy sort of house, and her parents are fabulously rich, and she has an actual butler man who gets to do all these things for her. He's called Hitch, which is his last name. You only get to call butlers by their last name. It's normal in the world of butlers. Ruby Redford drives to school in a helicopter sometimes and has these gadgets and things. Even Ruby Redford's sports gear isn't normal. Her sneakers have special springing power so she can jump over her enemies, and her bathing suit has a built-in propeller so she can swim as fast as a mackerel. Ruby gets mail all her own. Imagine that. It's all interesting and top secret from other detectives and government presidents and people, and it is full of clues and strange codes. But no one ever suspects anything, because why would they? That's the most ingenious thing about Ruby Redford. She doesn't need a disguise, because who would expect a schoolgirl to be a master investigator agent? No one. That's who. I only get mail at birthdays, so I've started sending off for things. There are lots of free things you can get them to send you if you fill out the coupons. Mom calls it junk mail, but I think it's interesting to get mail, even if it is about thermal undershirts. My dad gets mail with private written on it, so for all I know, he's a secret agent himself. I have had a peek at one of the letters, and there were lots of numbers and dates, and then some words in red saying, "Final reminder." It's all utterly suspicious. Yeah, I think.